Hi, folks, and welcome back to another episode of the Legends of Sport podcast. I'm your host, Andy Bernstein. I'm so happy to have Ralph Lawler and Bill Walton on this episode to bring to all of you. These gentlemen are great friends of mine. They're both Hall of Famers, so it's an honor to be the third Hall of Famer on this episode. Both are former Legends of Sport podcast guests, and in fact, Bill was the very first guest we had to launch the podcast. I've known Ralph Lawler and Bill Walton my entire 42 years in the NBA. When I broke into the league in the early 80s, Bill played for the San Diego Clippers, and Ralph was their broadcaster. When the Clippers moved to Los Angeles in 1984, they both traveled north as well. Together, we have witnessed so much NBA history and the ups and many downs of the Clippers franchise. Ralph writes about his journey in the NBA in his terrific new book, Bingo, My 40 Years in the NBA. I highly recommend that everyone goes out and gets this book. It's a goldmine of Ralph's personal stories, anecdotes about the greats of the game he crossed paths with over his amazing career. So much in this book, and I absolutely loved it. It was only fitting that I have both of these guys on the podcast to discuss so many fantastic stories in Ralph's book. They worked together as broadcast partners for 13 years. Bill credits Ralph with, quote, saving his life and being the force responsible for getting him into broadcasting. We talk about so much on this episode. We talk about an 18-day river rafting trip through the Grand Canyon they took together, how they first met and forged an unlikely lifelong friendship, how Bill got fired multiple times during their 13 years working together. Lots of amazing gems. So just a little bit about Ralph. Ralph spent 60 years in broadcasting across the gamut of sports, over 3,000 games with the Clippers during his 40-year career as their voice. Ralph was the Basketball Hall of Fame's Kurt Gowdy Award winner in 2019, and I was thrilled to be there to document that momentous occasion for Ralph and his wife, Sweet Joe, and their family. Ralph has a star on Hollywood Boulevard, and again, I was there to document it. I was also there for his final broadcast in 2019 when he paired with the big redhead Bill Walton for the final time. And what a glorious send-off that was. I'm honored to call both of these great men friends and really grateful to have them both as guests on today's episode to celebrate Ralph's new book. So enjoy this really, really fun episode. And as always, I'll see you on the backside. Oh, well, I got to welcome two of my favorite guys in the world, two great friends.
Here we go. Here we go. Bingo. Bingo.
I can't even get the intro in with this guy.
You don't need an intro. The show is on. Ralph Lawler's got a new book. Andy Bernstein is our host. I'm Bill. I'm the prop. Bingo.
That's all we need.
In the NBA. Ralph Lawler. Things just don't get any better than this.
And things just never change, too.
Ralph, how did
What's
you
never changed? What's never changed is that Ralph would never let me speak.
Oh, really?
He just
sure. Yeah.
He had a mute button. He had a mute button on his table that had my microphone be able to be muted.
Is that true, Ralph?
I thought I was just speaking the whole time, and here it was. None of it went out over the air. It just had reverb of Ralph Lawler going, bingo, fasten your seatbelts. Oh me, oh my, yikes. Lawler's Law, first to 100 wins. It was endless. It was glorious. It was fantastic. It was spectacular. It was the happiest time of my life when I wasn't being intimate with my wife. Oh my gosh. Glory, God bless her, and God bless Joe.
Oh,
you, Ralph, are you there?
Is our time up, Andy?
I think we're just about done. Thanks, Bill and Ralph.
I couldn't believe the incredible stories revealed in Bingo.
Yes. Well,
I've known Ralph since 1974, when I was the guest of honor in one of the finest press conferences ever held in Philadelphia. I showed up there. Yeah. I showed up in Philadelphia. I was on the worldwide NBA press tour for the #1 draft choice in the NBA. And Ralph was there. He was looking for scandalous information.
Oh, yeah, right.
I was coming from church on my way to the library. Ralph interrupted me, and things have never been the same since. Bingo, bingo. And then you know what I just came across?
What?
I was participating in the Paul Allen art auction.
Mm-hmm.
And I was the high bidder on this incredible story of the long, strange trip of Ralph Lawler.
Oh, that's a great painting.
This is it's
not showing up very well, unfortunately.
Yeah, it's kind of fading into your virtual background there, buddy. But that's okay. And so are
virtual.
You.
I thought we were live and in person.
Yeah, we are. But you're using.
Where are you guys?
You're using a virtual background.
Where are you guys? Oh my gosh,
Bill! Now that you opened the door, I want to know from Ralph, because that was the first time you met Bill, right? Ralph, is that 74 press conference?
I guess it was the first time I'd seen him play basketball in high school and in college, of course. But we, as he said, the #1 pick in the draft would, rather than go to the arena and get hounded by 50 different reporters.
Yeah.
I was never hounded.
Just relax, Bill. Go have a peanut butter and jelly sandwich with Lori for a minute while I talk about you. And so they had this assemblage at a hotel in downtown Philadelphia where the Trailblazers were staying, and there's a whole bunch of reporters and cameramen and writers and radio guys packed into this little room for a 3:00 meeting with Bill, and by 3:30 everybody's getting pretty darn restless, and finally Bill ambles in with their PR guy and sits down. He's got a bandana on, long red hair with a ponytail, a lumberjack shirt on, blue jeans and big hiking boots, and he stretches out. I'll tell you, his 7-foot frame, not his 6'11" frame, his 6'11", a 7-foot frame, and there was no question. It was the last place on earth that Bill wanted to be, and he just mumbled answers, and
I was dressed appropriately for the moment. I gave it everything I had. I'm a lifelong stutterer. I never felt comfortable in that position in my life.
Well, I can understand that now. But at the time, it was like, what's wrong with this guy? He's the #1 pick in the draft. He somehow graduated from UCLA for crying
with honors. With honors in 3.5 years, please.
Well, Bill, what I found really
40 years in the NBA. Wow, what a story! What a
hold it up again. But Bill, I got to ask you this, man. What I found really interesting about your story, okay?
No, this is about
Ralph. No. I just want to know something. Is that there were two Midwestern older men that were really pivotal in your life. One was John Wooden, of course, from Indiana, who was your coach, right? And still revered mentor.
Oh, you've heard of John Wooden?
I have heard of him. I actually met him.
Okay.
And the second is Ralph.
Nice of you to come out from under that rock.
But the second is Ralph Lawler, right? So we all know about your relationship with Coach Wooden. What was it about Ralph? Why is he so important to you as a person?
Ralph saved my life. Ralph gave me a new life. And Ralph is as smart, as intelligent, as interesting, as creative, as brilliant, as kind, as generous, as fine a human being as I've ever come across. And
finally, he's making sense.
Here I was, all these years, wandering aimlessly, lost and confused in the desert, a lost sailor away too long at sea, drifting too far from the shore. And all of a sudden, I came across this true saint of circumstance. And his name happened to be Ralph.
Right.
And it was just an incredible twist of fate. And I was waiting, I was searching, I was just clamoring for salvation. And there he was. So and the amazing thing about Ralph Lawler, about John Wooden, about Larry Bird, and about Steve Garfin, all these guys from the Midwest, like Bob Dylan too, all these little tiny guys, right, who never spoke about themselves. They were completely selfless until he started yelling, bingo! And then here it was, the world exploded and turned upside down. And I was looking around, I didn't see any ping pong balls flying through the air with numbers on them. And I looked back, and there the jumper was going through the net. And here it was with this phenomenal spirit, a rare, different dude, a spiritual force of nature like few others. And this guy who gave his life so that other people's dreams could come true. And all these guys are the same, whether John Wooden, Ralph Lawler, Steve Garfin, my spine surgeon, Larry Bird, all from the Midwest, Bob Dylan. I mean, they were never about themselves. They were always about the show. They were always about the game. They were always about what other people were doing. And now, my friend Ralph has put together this epic masterpiece, which when I'm reading it, I was just enthralled as can be with all the historical anecdotes, all the stories that I did not know. I mean, I lived with the guy forever and I didn't know all this stuff. I can only imagine what Jo thought when she read the book. I didn't know any of that.
There was some gems in there, I got to tell you. I mean, you guys, share a lot of things in common. I mean, you both have strong, loving, supportive wives, right? Lori and
my wife Lori is the greatest everything ever.
Absolutely.
She's not a thing, though. I'm trying to think of a better word. She's not a thing, but she's the greatest everything ever, and she's our CEO, our chief everything officer.
Yeah, but I have to.
Here I am finding myself out on this peninsula, surrounded totally by water and sharks and whales and jagged rocks, and I'm here with true legends of the sport, with Ralph Lawler and Andy Bernstein, two people who I've spent so much of my life with, and to be able to drift and dream and to think of what my life has turned into because of Ralph Lawler, the simple twist of fate that happened one day in 1990 at Pacific Beach. The fact that Ralph Lawler, who knew my entire family, knows my entire family, a lot of the people that Ralph knew so well are now passed away. But the fact that he knew my mom, who was a librarian, who inspired my love for reading. We grew up without a television set. And, here was Ralph Lawler growing up in this world that was nurtured around entertainment and theatrical stage performances with his, he keeps trying to tell us that he's from Peoria, but he's really from Toledo. And all this different stuff that went down here. And now it's all coming true, because when you write something down, it's one thing to sit there behind the microphone and say something, and then to write it down where people can go back and fact check. Oh my gosh. Isn't this show supposed to be about Ralph?
It is supposed to be about Ralph, but
he's just sitting there.
We know you and love you, Bill, and we didn't expect anything different. Ralph, could you talk about that fortuitous day? What was it? Did you say it was 1990?
It was in the fall of 1990.
Yeah, and you write about it in the book, and I wasn't aware of this at all. I didn't know this history. Ralph, tell us what happened that day with Bill.
And then I'll clean up the errors in fact.
What is so interesting, and Bill touched on it there, is how chance moments wind up impacting your life forevermore. I had it numerous times, and this time with Bill, it just so happened that Jo and I were at the beach. We were thirsty. We decided to go to the 7-Eleven. We could have just kept walking on the beach, but we didn't. We went to the 7-Eleven at the same time that Bill pretty badly needed a beer. And so
did I ever need a beer? And probably more.
Bill was retired for a year or two or something.
Retired? I've never been retired. I was forced to change.
Well, you could no longer run, jump, and do that kind of stuff for sure.
Right. So I needed a new life.
And he didn't know where he was going. And so we're talking in line, waiting to get to the front of the line to get our beers. And I said, what are you going to do? I have no idea. No, who knows? And I said, well, why don't you come be a broadcaster? We'd love to have you on our games. And Bill was like startled at the thought of it, or as he would have said then, the thought of it. because he still had his stutter and stammer, and he can explain to you how he got rid of that. God love him. It's one of the great accomplishments of his entire life. And as I recall, Bill, you went and broadcast some games in the old Continental Basketball Association on radio for free, just to kind of get a feel for what it was like. And it became a magical 13 years in my career. It changed everything about how I thought about doing a basketball game. It was entertainment. It wasn't just X's and O's and calling every play exactly right. It was a lot of our games were not very damn entertaining in those days. Believe me.
That's not true. That was some of the greatest broadcast material ever. They would take.
It did give us material, yes.
They would take the tapes of the game straight to the Radio and Television Hall of Fame. It was incredible.
I didn't see those or hear those tapes when I was at the Hall of Fame, but I'll hunt for them next time I'm there for sure. But
to clear up just a few misconceptions from that story, Ralph has been away from the microphone for a while here. And so I was wandering aimlessly on the beach. I had just had my ankle fused on March 15th, 1990. And that's a really long recovery, 6 to 9 months minimum before you get going. So I'm at the 6 or 7 month mark already, barely moving around. And I've learned over the course of my life that the best therapy for foot and ankle problems, are to go down to the beach, which is just down the way from where we live here in my hometown of San Diego, and walk in the soft sand for a little bit, get your foot moving as much as you can. But with an ankle fusion, there's no movement whatsoever, but it does stimulate the muscles, and then go down into the cold water. The Pacific Ocean is always cold, no matter what time of year it is. And then be done with it. And so I was doing that, as I did a lot. I spent half my adult life in the hospital. And here it was. I've had 39 orthopedic operations. Both my ankles are fused. Both my knees are replaced. My hands and wrists don't work. My spine's been rebuilt, reconstructed, replaced. And you look at my face. And I mean, for those of you who are still playing basketball, who are lucky enough, realize it. I broke my nose 14 times playing basketball. I got my front teeth knocked out 10 different times. For those lucky enough to still play basketball, don't play defense with your face, because this is what happened. And so I need a beer. I need more than a beer, but this is a family show here. And so I needed a big beer. And so I walked from the beach up to the 7-Eleven, and I'm standing there in line trying to buy a beer. And in front of me is Ralph. And he looks at me and says, "What are you doing?" And I said, "I'm trying to buy a beer. What does it look like I'm doing?" I said, "That's not what I meant." He said, "What are you doing with your life?" I said, "I have no idea." And so he said, "Well, I've got an idea." And so the idea was for me to become his potted plant, his prop. And Mike Fratello already had the job. And so Mike Fratello, a great friend of all of ours, Ralph went back to Los Angeles. I'm a San Diego guy. And so Ralph went back to Los Angeles, talked to the executive producer, Mike Weissman, and convinced him he thought it was a good idea. Nobody else thought this was a good idea but Ralph. And then Mike Fratello was kind enough, was generous enough to say, "Okay, let's give it a try." And then I come sauntering in on day one with no clue whatsoever what to do, and sit down, and the rest is history. And then Mike Fratello eventually just voluntarily, he just said, "You guys can take this on." I think he wanted to get as far away from me as possible.
Amazing.
But it was such a joy. I've been part of some of the greatest teams ever. I'm a team guy. And I just love the team aspect. I love the interaction. I love the talking back and forth, even though I couldn't talk, being a lifelong stutterer. But I couldn't wait. I couldn't wait to get to work every day, because Ralph is such a genius. And it was very much like a Grateful Dead show. It was very much like Bob Dylan, like Neil Young, like Jackson Browne and Jimmy Cliff and John Fogerty and all my musical heroes, because Ralph was able to create this space and this zone and take us to destinations like Jerry could with his guitar, and like Bob Dylan with his lyrics, and Neil Young with his voice and his passion and his imagination, and like Larry Bird with his basketball playing, like Greg Lee with his basketball playing, and all the great ones that I had the privilege of being a part of. And now, when I thought it was totally over, because when you have an ankle fusion, man, that changes a lot in your life. Wow. And you know, it sounds terrible, and it is terrible when you're doing it. But I mean, I'm all better now, and it's like fantastic. I need level ground. I need chairs all the time, but I had a chair, you know, right next to Ralph. Yeah. It was like it was like going to church every day, and it was so fun because we basically did whatever we wanted. And we set the own rules. There was nobody there to tell us anything what to do. I feel terrible. Looking back on it now, 32 years later, I just feel terrible for the producers and the directors, you know, who were trying to keep their jobs. Yeah. And we were just out there having a grand old time. And the endless number of things that would happen during the course of any one broadcast. And now this was in the day well before the internet and well before League Pass, but the games were still on satellite television for those who were passionate enough, committed enough, dedicated enough, and savvy enough to know how to find them on the satellite dishes. And so we had a nationwide following of people who would watch these shows, you know, from all over the country in every different time zone. And wherever we would go, people would come up to us and say, "Oh my gosh, you guys have the greatest show on earth out there." And it was just so fun. It just kept building so many different things. RalphLawler.com, Olowokandi Boulevard, Eric Piatkowski becoming the logo of the NBA, Keith Cross merchandise, so popular, unable to be kept on the shelves at the NBA store in New York, on and on and on. And I was sad when the games ended because, you know, I had a long 2 hour. Nice. Way to go, Bill. I had a nice 2 hour drive out and to get home. Yeah. But I just got to be able to think. Mm-hmm. And, you know, one of the things that I'm really envious of for other people in my life, people like Ralph, people like John Wooden, people who take the time to think about what's going down. And you know, John Wooden was so special in that he wrote everything down, and he took that time. He forced himself to take that time. Ralph has now written everything down. It's incredible. And to go back and relive it, and to see the pictures, and then to be able to buy the long, strange trip of Ralph Lawler at the Paul Allen auction. It was the most successful art auction. I can't believe. I mean, I was at my limit when everybody else dropped out. I'm glad they didn't know I was already there, because even $1 more would have put me further into debt and probably bankruptcy. Yes.
I love it. I love it. Ralph, I mean, you truly had to be the most patient person in America, much less in broadcasting or sports. I mean, first of all, you got this guy as your partner, so you got to be incredibly patient with him and tolerant and everything else. And then you're broadcasting, you're literally trying to entertain fans with like probably the worst teams in the history of the NBA most of the time. Not all the time, but it was pretty bad basketball that you and I, the three of us, lived through for many years, right?
Nobody has seen more bad basketball in history than Ralph Lawler.
So then, Ralph, how did you do it? I mean, how did you connect with the fans and so beloved by the fans that you were, you know, Tommy Lasorda used to say, you know, making chicken salad out of chicken shit. I mean, how did you do it, Ralph? For so many years, well, in your own self?
I have a totally different view. Yeah. I never thought I was watching bad basketball. Mm-hmm. If the Chicago Bulls were defeating the Clippers by 30 points at the half,
At the end of one.
Well, I think it was halftime, as I recall.
Okay.
I'm bigger with facts than you are, but I watched Michael Jordan and I watched Scottie Pippen, you know, and Dennis Rodman be absolutely brilliant. So I didn't see bad basketball. No. I saw great basketball, just not much that was played, you know, by the Clippers over the years.
Right. Good point.
I enjoyed every single game. of the 3,300 and some that I broadcast. I enjoyed every one of the games. The season we won 12 and lost 70. I hated to see the season end. I love the game, and I love the craft of broadcasting and trying to find a way when you're down by 30 at the half to give the viewer, the listener, a reason to motivate them to watch the second half of the darn basketball game. Mm-hmm. That was a real challenge. Yeah. And my wife, Jo, after a heavy defeat, we'd be driving home and she'd be, oh man, we just got killed. That was awful. And I go, we had a great show tonight. I felt great because that was my job. My job wasn't to win basketball games. It was to entertain and inform the fans.
Yeah. But you were an outstanding basketball player in your day. I remember, man, it was staggering, the stories in bingo, 40 years in the NBA by Ralph Lawler, to learn all the different things that you've done in your life, starting with being a basketball player and being on the team in this incredible hotbed of basketball action in Peoria, not Toledo, no, Peoria, Illinois, where you had all these influences in your life that really shaped and made you into the person, human being that you are today.
Well, I can tell you, Bradley used to beat UCLA in basketball whenever they would play, basically.
Which was never.
That is the truth. We win. You see,
by the time we do our next show, I will have a retort to that one. Historical facts, please. But by the time we come back from commercial break,
right?
Oh, so how about the time I'm getting ready for to go to the NBA All-Star game, and Ralph, you know, I had like 17 different jobs at the time when I was also working with Ralph, and Ralph was the foundation. He was the anchor to reality for me, right? And then I would always be flying around the country to do all this other stuff. And so Ralph asked me one time what I had planned for the weekend, and I was going to the All-Star weekend. And so I just started talking about, and I knew my itinerary by heart because I'd been working on it. And I just started talking and listing off all the different things. And then it fades to commercial while I'm still talking. And then it comes, you know, you have 2 minutes of commercials and it comes back and I'm still talking about my itinerary.
I said, just keep on going, Bill.
That's hilarious. Well, I got to hear about this famous river rafting trip, okay? Because that blew my mind when I heard about that. That was incredible. I read about it in the book. There's pictures in there. How did this all start? Is this a phone call, Ralph, from Bill, or what was the deal?
I invited Ralph to everything in my life.
Okay.
Except a Grateful Dead concert.
That's not true. No, well, we learned over the course of our lives not to invite people to the Grateful Dead concerts. They would invite themselves. If they invited themselves, we would take them. But it's not fun for us to take other people to the shows because that's where we go for our fun.
But you did invite me at that Bulls practice during the finals. I remember it like it was yesterday because it's just like I was shocked.
It was only 35 years ago, please. You know,
it's a great
what happens, Andy, when you get old, like I am, you know, is that you
happy 70th birthday, by the way.
Thank you.
Yes, happy birthday.
Every day is my birthday, man. And so what happens is that you remember what happened, where it happened, who was there, and what you did, but you can have no idea when it happened. I mean, it could have happened 2 days ago. It could have happened 40 years ago.
But I want to go back to that river rafting trip.
Okay, Ralph.
Remember that?
Oh, I remember the raft trip. So I'll set it up here.
Yeah. Okay.
Then, you know, I love the outdoors. I love, you know, when John Lennon said, "Above us only sky," that was me. And one of the reasons I love basketball so much is because the roof was way up there in the clouds, right? Or outdoors, no roof at all. So, you know, my parents growing up, God bless them, they're both passed away. Ted and Gloria, but greatest parents ever, but zero interest in sports. But my dad loved the outdoors. My mom had no interest in the outdoors. She was a girl from Brooklyn, right? So, yeah. But my dad, he grew up in California, and he just loved California. He loved going out, being outside. And so he took us everywhere. And so then when I moved to Oregon, I fell in with all these really cool dudes who were doing all this fantastic stuff of, exploring nature, including rafting the rivers of Oregon. In California, there's no rivers to raft. There were rivers of sand, castles built on sand, right? And so here it was, but I rafted all these rivers of the Northwest. And then one time, my great friend David Halberstam recommended a book because Utah was doing really well in the playoffs and everything. And whenever a team rose to the top, whether it be San Antonio or Houston or Utah, David would recommend this incredible book about these places, right? And the one that he recommended for Utah was Down the Great Unknown. I think it's Edward Dolnick, I think is the author. Check it out. But the title is definitely Down the Great Unknown. And so I'm reading this story, this history of the first successful trip by boat down the Colorado River through the Grand Canyon. And I'm just terrified. I'm never going to do this. This just sounds so scary. And then all my friends in the world of the Grateful Dead, they loved rafting too. And they were going on the American River, mostly up out of Sacramento. There, it was close to the Bay Area. But I had done the Snake River, the Salmon River, the Owyhee River, the Rogue River, lots of rivers in the Northwest. And my friends, they kept saying, Bill, man, we got to go raft the Grand Canyon. We got to go do this. And I said, no, man, it's too scary. I'm not going to go do that. I already have one fused ankle. My spine is terrible. My hands and wrists don't work. My knees don't work. I said, no, Bill, it'll be fine. We got it covered. And so finally they talked me into it. And I said, okay. Okay. And so I said, well, let's put a team together. We got to have a team to go. Mm-hmm. And so Ralph and Joe were at the top of the list.
Unbelievable.
And so we went. And we went, it was 18 days and 226 miles from Glen Canyon Dam down to the upper reaches of Lake Mead. Yeah. And it was incredible. It was spectacular. The things that went down on this trip. Yeah. So we get to the bottom of the trip at the end, and we're standing there, we're unloading and putting everything from the boats into the cars to get out of there. And we were just like so sad because it was over. It was like the end of a Grateful Dead tour. It was like the end of a Clipper season. It was like the end of a Clipper game with Ralph. Just sad because it was so much fun and it was over. And so we looked at each other and we just said, everybody said in unison, let's go do it again. So we did. 2 years later, we did the same thing again. And Ralph was at the top of the list, but he couldn't go. He was committed to go to Russia to be with Vladimir Putin and go over there and try to plan the future of the world. And so Ralph didn't make the second trip. Yeah. But he was the leader of the pack on the first trip. Oh my gosh.
Ralph, what do you remember? Like one or two things from that trip? I mean, it sounds like it was kind of life-changing a little bit.
Well, it's when Joe and I reflect back, it's like one of the really great experiences of our entire life. We had a phone call one night. We're watching TV at home, and it was Bill saying, "Want to go on a whitewater rafting trip down the Grand Canyon?" I said, "Oh yeah, I've done some camping." I thought that sounded like great fun, and so I said, "Let me check with Joe," and she was all up for it, which really pleased me and surprised me. But we went, and it was marvelous. The weather changed from hot to cold or cold to hot. I forgot how much it was, but the magnificent, you're down there in this wild rapid, and you look up and there's these walls on both sides. And you sit up at night and drink and eat. And Bill Kreutzmann from the Grateful Dead was on the trip. Wow. We played backgammon. We had more damn fun. And I do recall Bill saying when we got to Flagstaff after it was over, only people we knew going into the trip were Bill and Lori. Yeah. By the end of the trip, these were people that we truly loved. and everybody was hugging and tears running down our cheeks. And it was one of those things you hated to see end. And I haven't seen some of those people since, which is sad. Some I have, but we're forever grateful to Bill and Lori for making that possible for us. It was a great thrill.
Well, one of the problems with the trip is that happy hour didn't start till 5. But
Yeah.
some of us set our watches to 5 and then broke the watch, so it just stayed at 5, and then it was always happy hour. I mean, it started before the dawn.
I love it.
Before the trip, Bill said, "What do you guys want to drink?" And I said, "Vodka and cranberry juice." And it never ran out, believe me.
That's not true. It did run out.
We would get off the raft and pull up at some sandbar somewhere, and we'd go out and put up our tents. By the time we got your tent up, the bar was open, and delicious dinners were being cooked.
Wow.
It was we had 3 or 4 birthdays, including Joe's birthday there, and they somehow were able to bake a cake in an I don't know how they did it, but they did.
Yeah.
They were all great. They were all great sports,
Incredible.
particularly the ladies. Because I'm not going to speak for any of the other ladies, but Lori, she is not into camping. Camping to Lori is when the Ritz-Carlton goes to a limited menu at 4 a.m. Right?
Oh yeah.
There were no limits on this trip.
Ralph, you had a great story. You had a great story about Joe and I think the curling iron or something for her hair.
Yeah, because when she said she would agree to go on this trip, she said, "With one thing, you've got to get a butane hair curler for me." I go running around town, I find a butane hair curler, and so our first night, we get off the raft and we set up our tent and we go in. The next morning, she gets up and she fires up this butane hair curler. She's in there curling her hair. That was the first night of 17. It never happened again. I mean, it was just let it go.
I love it.
It was like being on tour with the Grateful Dead. You show up with one change of clothes, and then you figure out what goes on from there. And you can always go to the parking lot and get whatever you need.
Unbelievable.
Because Jimi Hendrix's boat had everything you could ever imagine needing. And then you had Walt, who was living in Costa Rica, and Robbie Pitagora, who was the captain of the Ship of Fools. And it was just over the top. And one night, Ralph and I, you may be surprised to find, to discover this, Andy, but one night around the campfire circle, that Ralph and I had a disagreement.
Is that a fact?
Yeah.
Okay.
And it's memorialized in this picture that I just bought at the Paul Allen.
Why can't we see that picture, I wonder?
You can't see that?
It's fading into your virtual.
No, okay, I will send you
please.
a digital image that you can put it into this show in the editing and post-production, which I'm sure you do a lot of.
Oh, we have a crack staff right over here. Yes. Yeah.
You have Eugenia Chow, man, who doesn't get any better than that.
No, I mean, come on.
How'd you get so lucky?
I have no idea.
So we were singing songs and telling stories around the campfire, and it was a beautiful night with a full moon, and it was just spectacular. Light show with comets streaking across the universe. Absolutely spectacular, beyond description, right?
And it was. That's amazing.
And then Ralph could not figure out why some of the mountains were illuminated and others were not. And because there was different shades and shadows, light from the moon, and Ralph could not figure that out. And I tried to explain to him, Ralph, have you ever stood in the shade of a tree? Have you ever stood in the shade of a mountain? And he still couldn't figure it out. I mean, it was like he had spent his entire time on ralphlawler.com answering all the questions that the fans would just pour into ralphlawler.com. And this went on. And, I'm going to say that there was 20 guests, 24 guests, Ralph, and then
All right.
and about 15 crew people. So this was a big group. and we were all having a lot of fun. There was no curfew, there was no rules, there was no test of any time. But here Ralph couldn't figure out the moon shadow, right? And I tried to explain to him what Cat Stevens was singing.
There's another song.
Yeah. And
I love it.
I really got it. It was just it was a spectacular time, and all the different things that went down, the conversations, the friendship. Now, Ralph and Joe, they love the sunshine, right? I mean, these folks are tan all the time. They love that sun. And so the first day we get out there, and it's like so hot, in the southern Utah deserts, right? And it is hot as can be. And it's a hard load in, getting all the stuff, all the gear, especially the vodka for Ralph. And then to watch and witness
that was one band.
To watch and witness the battles and the struggles for possession of the vodka between Ralph and Bill Kreutzmann. Oh my gosh. I was concerned, where's Maurice Lucas to restore order in the universe when you need him, right? And so we pull over for lunch on the very first day, and it's 100+ degrees, right? And so Robbie Pitagora, the captain, the guy in charge of everything, and we're all sun people ourselves, right? But nobody's a sun person like Ralph and Joe. And so Robbie pulls over in this beautiful beach, with nice cottonwood trees and a creek coming down to feed the big Colorado River. It's just spectacular, but it's 110 degrees and we have no shade or anything. And Ralph and Joe immediately strip out of their life jackets, and they're in their bikini bathing suits, and they're just sprawled out on these rocks, just soaking it all in. We're begging Robbie to please just move down one bit to get some shade here.
Oh,
but it was just it was a trip we'll never ever forget.
Oh, unbelievable.
Got that right.
Well, guys, I we go on forever. I don't want to keep you guys too long, but
why not?
I do have to talk about
RalphLawler.com.
Yes, absolutely.
One of the great marketing gifts to the world.
And the book. The book.
Oh, bingo! My signs, my artwork.
Right. But Ralph, what really struck me also about in the book was just the journey through all of the years with the Clippers. I mean, we don't have to recant it all, and the fans will know what we're talking about. But the fact that, well, first of all, I hope you guys realize that after Ralph retired, I'm the last standing guy who was there on opening night of 1984 when the Clippers moved to LA.
No way. You're the last guy?
Yeah. The first was Carl Lair, then Ralph, and then me. Yeah. So.
Oh, the rest of them are all in jail, right?
Jury's out on that one, Bill. I don't know.
Where a lot of them belong. Yeah, because on that team, the checks bounced higher than the balls did.
Oh, yeah. There's some great stories in here.
Yeah.
And
worst basketball ever, and basically criminal business behavior. It was the NBA, the National Basketball Players Association, they worked full time just on the Clippers.
What was going on with the Clippers, of course. God. But what's unbelievable is
let's say something nice about Steve Ballmer.
This is what I'm going to say. Wait, hold on. Let me get it out. So I started off in the sports arena, right? Which the boss, Bruce himself, called the jump. I
wasn't
there. That jumps, right? The dump that jumps. He loved that place, Springsteen. I shot all my games there, and then we moved to Staples Center, and now Ballmer is building a $2 billion with a B, dollar arena, the Intuit Dome. I mean, I can't even get my mind around how the franchise has gone from there to there. It's
I speak constantly around the country on the importance, the value, and the elements, the qualities of leadership.
Mm-hmm.
Ballmer is the epitome of leadership because he took what was a farce and he made it into a shining ball of excellence and perfection. And all the different people that he has in there and the players. And we just hope that all the guys can stay healthy as players and get going again, because what a group of guys. And Ty Lue is a fantastic coach, and Lawrence Frank and Gillian and all the different people, Chris Wallace in the PR department. Ralph and I could fill up 10 books on what went down in the years when I was a player for the Clippers, when I was the broadcaster for the Clippers, because I got fired every year as the broadcaster. I got
every
sued.
year, every week.
Well,
Sometimes during the game.
I got fired one season 4 different times, and during the season, and I got fired. One of those times was during halftime of a game. They just came over. They just took my headset and said, "You're out of here." And it was basically like with John Wooden when he would say, "Bill, it's all fine and good that you think that way, but I'm the coach here. We've enjoyed having you. We're going to miss you." That was like that. You knew when it was time to go.
Right.
And
right.
I was so sad because, well, when ABC, ESPN bought the contract to the NBA in the early 2000s after 13 years, 2003 of being with Ralph, there were very serious discussions about having Ralph and me be the broadcast team for ESPN. And sadly, it didn't come true. And I maybe it's because Ralph just held out for too much money. I don't know.
Is that true, Ralph? Will you hold it out? But Ralph, how does it make you feel now? You're in retirement. You can step back. I'm sure you're watching the Clipper games. You and Joe, maybe with a cocktail at home with your feet up, to see how what has happened. In the maturation and the journey of the Clippers, and the fact that one day there will be a banner hanging on some arena somewhere, whether it's downtown LA or in Inglewood. I think it's inevitable. How did after going through everything you did for 40 years, how are you feeling about that?
Well, and it goes beyond 40 years, Andy, because my concept for the whole book goes back to 1946. I was 8 years old when the NBA began. And my dad and I became NBA fans because George Mikan was the face of the league. He was Mr. Basketball, and we had seen him play at DePaul against Art Bradley basketball team. So I followed the league from his first year through its 75th year. I don't think there's many other people in the world that did that, who were also a part of the league for the vast majority of those years. To see the Clippers go from their baby steps in San Diego to making the move to Los Angeles, which in hindsight was a bit of business brilliance by Donald Sterling. Settle down, Bill. But
the strength of my game.
Bomber taking over the franchise in 2014 from the ashes that were left by the terrible stuff that came out from the audio recording of Sterling and his girlfriend Stiviano.
That stuff was always around. We were late. We were late, and that's our fault.
I absolutely agree with you. And I title one of the chapters of the book "The Sterling Stigma," and it was a stigma. And at times you just thought, can I work under these circumstances? Can I work for this man? But the league is so great. The broadcasting is so much fun to do. And I always felt that I worked for the fans. I felt that way from day one to the very last day. We were there for the fans. I wasn't there for Donald Sterling or Andy Rozier or sports.
Medic, please.
Yeah. But it was a great run, and I'm thrilled to see the direction they're going now. I have no regrets at all about having left when I left, even though a couple of months later they bring in Paul George and Kawhi Leonard. There was never a moment where I thought, oh man, I wish I were there. I might have wished that Bomber had bought the team 10 years earlier.
How about 50 years earlier?
Yeah.
So
Incredible.
Ralph,
San Diego would also be in San Diego. But
Ralph, speak to us, please, about the impact, the importance of Hank Vanderheyden in your life when you were at a crossroads, when you thought you were going to be the next Jerry West, when you thought you were going to be the next Bob Pettit as a basketball player.
Well, I never had those kind of illusions, but I loved the game. But I was a business major at Bradley University in the late 50s, and I wasn't enjoying it much. But the thought was my dad and mom had a string of drive-in movie theaters and that I would take over them, and that would be my future, carrying on, what they had invested much of their life in. And in the middle of my junior year, I can't do this anymore. I hated all my classes. I wasn't happy. And so I had a girlfriend who was taking a bunch of courses in the speech communications and drama department. So I said, okay, we'll have some classes together. So I switched over, and I had an introduction to radio class that was taught by a man named Henry Vanderhayden. And
Hank.
Hank is right. And the entire department was the size of the motel room I'm talking to you from right now. And but the first time I heard my voice come out of a big speaker on the wall after recording it, I went, oh my God, this is fun. This is great. And Hank kept citing me as listen to Ralph. That's the way you should do it. And I thought they never did that when I was in my accounting class or my economics class. They'd say, hey, dummy. And he got me started, got us a job at a couple little radio stations in town. And I have been forever indebted to him. He passed a couple of years ago, sadly, but we did reconnect, maybe 10 years ago.
Yeah.
And he'd been following my career.
Amazing.
I didn't know if he even remembered who I was, but without him, without Irv Kays, without Bill Walton, those, and without my sweet Joe, I would have had no career.
Well,
and what a career it's been.
Had a hell of a career, over 60 years of broadcasting, Ralph.
Well, incredible, because I remember the night in Miami.
Yeah.
Because while we basically completely ignored the producer and the director all the time, we treated them as irrelevant cannon fodder, except for the great and brilliant Michael Ireland.
A lot.
Michael Ireland was one of the few directors in my broadcast career that could ever follow my train of thought with the camera, right? And so Ralph and I were, Joe and Laurie are with us on this road trip down to Miami in the early days of the Heat franchise, and we say, we're in Miami, it's a beautiful day, let's just wear Hawaiian shirts, Caribbean shirts for the game tonight. And so we did it, right? And so the Clippers, in classic Clipper fashion, come out and just lay an egg. It was a brown egg.
Yeah.
And so Ralph and I got blamed for the
really?
performance.
It's your fault.
Because we were wearing flowered print Tommy Bahama shirts.
Oh my God.
Oh my God.
Well, I got to tell you that and so many stories are just gold mine of stuff in here. In this
bingo. Yeah. 40
bingo.
Years in the NBA.
Yes.
It's absolutely incredible.
But
that stuff about Ralph and his parents, Ralph and Marie, and his older sister, who still lives in Bend to this day, where Ralph and Joe spend their time in the summer. And just all the different things. Bradley, class of 61, he comes to San Diego, comes to Riverside.
Riverside, yeah.
Places. Let me look at the call letters for the station here on this KPRO.
Right.
And all the different sports.
You got it. Very good.
Yeah.
Because look, I have this piece of art here that I got at the Paul Allen art auction, the most successful auction ever.
Oh my God!
And so, I used to do all my shopping on RalphLawler.com, and you get shirts, could get hats, could get little bags.
Hi, Bill.
It was incredible. And so, one time, I get to the Clipper game, and I don't know, there was this guy named Michael Smith or something. I don't know who he was, but he would show up every now and again, right? And because I couldn't do every game,
right?
So I'm at this one game in Sacramento, and for this is in the beginning stages of globalization, right? And so the Clippers are going to add a Spanish language broadcast to the show. Which is fantastic, I love all that stuff.
Yeah.
And so Ralph asked me if I will welcome the audience in Spanish, and I said, "Well, I can't speak Spanish. I can read it. I can read Spanish out loud, but I can't speak it fluently, just extemporaneously." And so Michael Smith says, "No problem, Bill. I'll write up the speech for you, and we'll just I'll put it on a piece of paper. We'll tape it at the bottom of the camera like an impromptu teleprompter. And, you can welcome the Spanish audience. So great. So he writes it up. I look at it. I rehearse it in my mind a couple times. And we come on the air, and Ralph sort of leads me into this. And I turn to the camera and I read it word for word, perfectly, flawlessly.
Beautiful.
In Spanish, right? Without stuttering, which is like impossible. And so,
having no idea what he's saying.
Right. I have no idea what I was saying. But Michael Smith and Ralph had conspired that I was announcing my resignation from Clippers.
Oh, come on.
Spanish on this broadcast.
I'm through with broadcasting.
I'm through with broadcasting. I'm done with this. I've had it. I'm moving on in my life. All in Spanish, right? And so the fans at home, they could understand it. We had Clipper Nation is a huge Hispanic element to it, right? And so they become irate and they start calling the television station.
Oh yeah,
demanding that Bill Walton be put back on the air. And they stormed the offices. Then we want Walton. We want Walton. And oh my God,
I think some were applauding.
It was endless.
That we have to end on that story because I hadn't heard that before.
Trying to get off the air here, man.
Not in the book.
It's a podcast, please.
I know, but I have to be respectful of both your times. And
that'll be the first time that's ever happened.
Well, Ralph, I just got to tell you real quick. Bill was the very first guest on the Legends of Sport podcast. He was so gracious. All-Star Weekend. We were set up at Staples Center, and Bill comes on, and this God's honest truth. I asked him a question and put down the microphone, took a walk around the entire suite level, came back, he was still talking. So not a big surprise.
I learned so much.
At one point here, some years ago, I was inducted into the California Sports Hall of Fame. Mm-hmm. And Will and Lori were going to drive out to
Ontario
resort in the desert.
Morongo, the Morongo Resort.
Morongo Resort. And so we all go there and assemble, and Bill shows up with his chair, and he didn't know that he was going to be asked to introduce me.
Oh, boy.
They'd asked Bill, will you please introduce Ralph? They told me we've got about 45 minutes set aside for this part of our presentation at night.
Yeah.
So Bill got up without a note, without a previous thought, and did 45 minutes of introduction, handed it over to me. I said, thank you very much. Our time is up. That was it. And those who have listened to this podcast will fully understand that.
Easiest job in show business.
It was one of the great moments of my life, rivaling the night in San Diego at the beautiful temple church-like Mecca that the San Diego Sports Arena is. When Ralph Lawler
Sports Arena.
When Ralph Lawler interviewed my 93-year-old grandmother on the at halftime.
Oh, I got to see the tape of that.
No, this was special. This was remarkable because my grandmother.
Is that what it was?
Now Emily was her name. Yes.
Yeah.
And, Emily Hickey. That was her name. And
Grandma Hickey. That's it. Yeah.
Grandma Hickey, and she was 93. She'd come to all the games, right? And my career was just in shambles. It was just a disaster. I was injured all the time. And so Ralph, it was at the end of the season. And so he wanted to interview my grandmother as the season is coming to a close. And
she sat at the end of the court every game.
Yeah.
Right. She came to every game and sat there and cheered and would knit and sit next to my mom, and they would talk and just chatter. And what's this game these guys are playing, right? And so at halftime, she comes over and sits down there with Ralph next to, it's on radio, and Ralph starts interviewing. The interview is going fine, and everything is just perfect. And so then Ralph, knowing it has to wrap it up because there's a time limit here, unlike this podcast. And Ralph asked my grandmother, who's 93. So, Grandma Hickey, any regrets in your life? And without hesitation, she leans into the microphone, a live microphone, and says, oh, yes, Ralph, definitely regrets and frustration, disappointment, because I've never smoked marijuana and I've never slept with a black man. And Ralph looks at her and says, well, with that, we're going to have to take a break, and we'll be right back after this very important message from our most valued sponsors.
That's exactly what she said.
That is unbelievable. What a great
I love her.
Well, you guys are unbelievable. I love you both. And I know combined.
I love Ralph Lawler. Bingo.
Yes.
Fasten your seatbelts. Yikes. Oh, me, oh, my. It was so fun.
Incredible.
I'm just sad. I'm just sad that it ended and we're not doing it anymore. But I just think we should just come back on this podcast, The Legends of Sport, at least 3 times a week.
Anytime you want, Bill.
Okay.
Anytime you want. But I am so happy to have had you both on, and Ralph, wishing you all the best of success with the book. Anybody, you don't have to be a Clipper fan. You don't even have to be an NBA fan to understand the passion and love that you have for your craft, for your sport, for the fans, and then all that comes across. And your life story is just incredibly, for me, inspirational.
If you like life,
yes.
If you're happy that you're alive, if you're a grouch, you don't want any part of us. But if you like life, you're going to love this book because it takes you on the long, strange trip of Ralph Lawler. And what a trip it's been. The number of things that Ralph has done that will just blow your mind. Like when you read like a great masterpiece of something that was like over the top incredible, you always say to yourself, there's no way this could have happened, but it did. And that's the way Bingo is. You're reading all these different stories about these encounters, these relationships, these friendships, these opportunities, these crises moments when you're standing at the fork in the road and you got to make a decision in your life. And that was Ralph. And it just keeps coming. It's like the Colorado River just coming right down and just carving this incredible canyon of life with Ralph Lawler images in the rocks up on the side coming over the waterfalls and everything. Oh my God.
Way to bring it home, Bill.
Again, Ralph.
Way to tie it together, buddy. That was great. I love it. Fantastic. Well, listen, I wish you the best, Ralph, with the book tour. I wish you the best with the signings and the stuff you're going to do with this guy, because
you're going to need it.
but
how about all the tough times that Ralph has had to endure, and with profession, with professionalism, and with character, and with dignity, and with class. When it was a disaster, and the health challenges, and the personal challenges, and all the stuff that goes on in all of our lives, yet he just kept going. He was, he delivered every single day.
Absolutely.
And I was there. I will be able to say for the rest of my days, and I'm just getting started. Hey, man, I was there when Ralph would say, "Bingo!" and the world just fell into perfect order from maddening chaos, from the absurd nonsense that we had to deal with on a constant basis. Bingo! And all of a sudden it was rainbows and butterflies and rivers with water in them. I'm the luckiest guy in the world, Ralph. Thank you. Thank you for my life, Ralph.
Thank you.
Well, thank you both.
I love Ralph.
Love you guys, and best of success, Ralph. This was so much fun for me. I didn't even have to have any questions. I don't even know why we prepared for this thing.
Oh, Lori just came back from her own camping trip here. She just got in.
I'll let you go and greet your wife. Take care, guys. Say hi to both your beautiful.
Oh, we love you, Andy. We love you, Ralph. And we'll see you soon. Bingo!
Well, that was fun. I really hope everyone enjoyed this conversation with Ralph Lawler and Bill Walton as much as I did. Not really sure how Ralph got a word in edgewise over 13 years working with Bill, but that's what makes the big redhead who he is, and their partnership so great. Please, folks, if you're interested in NBA history or just want to read some fascinating stories about one of the greats in broadcasting history, I highly recommend you get a copy of Ralph's new book, Bingo, 40 Years in the NBA. Terrific book and a great gift, by the way. Remember, everyone, you can find us on the iHeart app and online, as well as Apple and Spotify and your favorite podcast platform. Keep following us on Instagram at Legends of Sport, our Twitter at Legends_of_Sport, our website, legendsofsport.net, and of course, as always, our YouTube and TikTok channels, Legends of Sport. My photography can be found on Instagram and Twitter at ADB Photo Inc. So thanks again to Ralph and Bill and to everyone for continuing to support the Legends of Sport podcast. Remember to rate and review and tell all your friends. We'll be back next week with another great guest and episode. Until then, stay safe, stay well.